My name is Carolyn Hill. I was born and raised right here in Suwanee, and I'm here today to just give you a little bit of a background of what was going on in Suwanee from roughly 1947 to maybe 1961. Even though I still live here today, I'm trying to think back what was like way back then. I grew up across the railroad track right next to the hotel, and as a result, we were able to go and do anything we wanted to do right here in Suwanee because we felt safe, we felt secure, we knew our neighbors. Mother and Daddy knew that we'd be back by supper time to eat, but we would get out on our bicycles. With about 4 of us, we had a little club called Just We Four. We would go up and down Main Street a lot on our bicycle. Now, there was no pavement there. It was strictly dirt, and maybe sometimes some rocks that would knock you over and you'd get hurt or something. But the post office was my daily trip, and you would go there. Mr. Joe Holt was our postmaster at that time. You'd walk up to the window and you would say, "Mail for Faye Roberts." No, you would never say that, excuse me. You would say, "Mail for Mrs. Benson Roberts." Because at that time, a woman was not addressed by her first name. It was only Mrs. Benson or whatever, Suwanee, Georgia, and that's all was necessary. There were no zip codes or anything like that. Now, if you were single, you would go by your first name, like my aunt, Loretta Roberts. She used Loretta. Anyway, the post office was there to walk up, to ask for your mail. There were no boxes, nothing like that. But if you wanted a package, then it could be delivered at the depot, which was across the street. I remember one particular time I received a wonderful little red suitcase from that depot because the man would come on the train, they would throw out the baggage, and then you would get a little card when you'd come to the post office, and that told you where to go get your package. Sort of like Amazon, maybe not. But anyhow, I would go there, and I got to go by myself, which was a big, big deal, and to present the little card. And I got my red suitcase, and it would barely fit into my basket on my bicycle, but I remember it as a big day. The depot later was torn down. I'm not sure exactly what year all of that came about, but then later on, the city decided that it was time to get a caboose in order to honor this place. But the caboose was purchased for about $25,000, and my aunt, Loretta Roberts, was a city council person at one time, and I guess because of that, maybe she was asked to do this project. I really don't know the particulars, but she knew she had a brother, my daddy, Benson Roberts, who was handy with doing things like installing things. So he came in, not all this brickwork certainly, but he installed the caboose as far as putting it up on whatever it's on anyway to make it stable. And then, well, he painted it, I guess, first, because it was a sort of an orangey gold color, I think, originally. The Norfolk Southern Railroad, I think, are the ones that sold it to the city for the $25,000, and then there was additional money that had to be paid later because of removing a crossing. This has enjoyed a lot of activity for the city because children can come here, have a lighting during the Christmas season, hot chocolate and all kinds of things, and it's been a wonderful addition. I'm excited to be able to express the involvement my aunt had, who served as a council person for 2 years. She was also the very first woman council person. At that time, there were no women serving on the city council, and she was the very first one. She was able to defeat, I think it was 3 other men without a runoff, and I think that was a pretty big deal for her because she made a little poster showing that. Anyhow, her service to the city continued even later because she had interviewed people all around the city trying to get their feelings about how they felt about the city of Suwanee. Her mother, Effie Roberts, my grandmother, worked at the Pierce's Corner Store. Then it was called the Roy B. Payne Emporium, and she sold fabric there. And as a result, I'd get to go and help her lift up the bolts of fabric and everything as a child. This was a small community, I think about 300 or so people. So you could just sort of were free to come and go and do things that you wanted to. Mother and Daddy were not concerned about us. There was not a safety issue, and neighbors loved neighbors. Loretta's involvement continued because she was an inclusive person, even before we knew the word inclusive, I guess. Many of the Black people lived up on the hill and beyond. Miss Lottie Branham was the one who did the ironing for our family, and she was not a servant or anything, but we paid her to do it. And then we had other Black people who came to different houses, and they were our friends. We took care of each other, and as a result, I played with the little children and became friends with many of them down through the years. Later, they were in my Girl Scouts group, in fact, so a long involvement. But the main street of Suwanee was sort of the nucleus for me because I lived so close. And if you wanted to go to church, you went to the Methodist church or you went to the Baptist church over on the other hill. If there was something going on at one and nothing at the other, then you would go to the other one. Dare to say there was very little things going on in the city of Suwanee at that time. And so our churches, our school, this main street was sort of the center of town. At the end of the street, there was a cotton mill. And that was where the men would carry the cotton in order to get it baled up. I remember one particular time being afraid in Suwanee, and that was when there was a huge fire. There was a shoe factory just across the street there, and I thought it was 3 stories high. I'm not sure how big it was, but you could see the flames shooting up. And that night, I remember my mother said I could not go any closer than this crossing. And there were 3 of us that stood there that night, just scared, as the men would go back and forth with their trucks with water in big barrels, because we had no fire department. They were trying to keep it from burning the store next door, which happened to be Mr. Kennedy's grocery store. And they saved it that night, saved the store. They didn't save the shoe factory. But that was a night that I was afraid in Suwanee. But I can't remember many other times that I was afraid in Suwanee. It was a safe area, an area that I felt loved, secure, and cared for. Main Street, a good hometown. The Caboose is making it maybe even a better hometown. That's my desire. And I love Suwanee.